Yeah, it's new song. We left off on about page 205, I believe.
Yeah.
We had done the first part of the song, and I believe we got to Good Hufflepuff, she took the rest and taught them all she knew. Thus the houses and their founders retained friendships firm and true. So Hogwarts worked in harmony for several happy years, and we talked about how many is several. You know, it's more than 3, but probably fewer than 10. School's been around for 1,000 years, so this harmony did not last long. Okay? But then discord crept between us. Okay? Discord, as in disharmony, because harmony was the word used just 2 lines above that. But I think the sorting hat also means another kind of discord. I think it means discord, not musical chord, but chord as in related to cardiac. Disheart crept in. Feeding on our faults and fears. What's meant by faults? Fault has 2 meanings. Okay? Can mean individual failings, messing up. What else can it mean? I'm from California.
Like a fault line.
Yeah, fault line. Cracks. That is, the cracks between the friends. Okay? Discord crept in and it does what? It exacerbates those cracks. It widens them. What did Dumbledore say at the end of book 4 was, Voldemort's great power or skill to separate people, okay? To emphasize or to utilize those faults between people. The houses that, like Pillars 4, had once held up our school. Notice, the houses had been the underpinning of what? The entire school. Now, turned upon each other and divided, sought to rule. Each of the houses, the sorting hat says, now sought to rule over the others. Okay? Christ, and then Abe Lincoln said, a house divided what?
Cannot stand.
Cannot stand. And for a while it seemed the school must meet an early end, what with dueling and with fighting and the clash of friend on friend. And at last there came a morning when old Slytherin departed. And though the fighting then died out, notice, Slytherin leaves and what happens? There is seeming harmony. All right? Old Slytherin departed, and though the fighting then died out, he left us quite downhearted. What does that mean? Brokenhearted. Why? Because a human heart is made up of what? 4 chambers. 4 houses. Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff. And what happened? Slytherin leaves. The heart is now downhearted. It's not complete. Okay? Human heart can't run on 3 chambers. 4-cylinder cars designed to run on 4 cylinders. It can run on 3. It won't run well, and you'll notice it very quickly. Pardon?
So it'll shake you all over the place.
Yeah, it'll shake you all over the place. Okay? So, the school now becomes downhearted. It's like it's missing a beat. And never since the Founders 4 were whittled down to 3 have the houses been united as they once were meant to be. These 3 aren't united. Why? Because they're missing this 4th chamber. Okay? Does that mean there's not a Slytherin house? No, there is a Slytherin house. But what's missing from Slytherin? After Slytherin left, back then, its soul. Okay? It was missing Slytherin. And now the sorting hat is here, and you all know the score. Okay, keep in mind, who did the sorting hat belong to? Godric Gryffindor. And we're told by the sorting hat, Gryffindor whipped me off his head, and the founders put some of their brains in it. Probably not literal brains, but it's almost like they put a bit of themselves into the hat. So the hat is speaking, to some extent at least, I think, from the perspective of Gryffindor. Okay? There's loss being expressed here. And now the sorting hat is here, and you all know the score. I sort you into houses because that is what I'm for. That is my purpose for being, to sort you into houses. But this year I'll go further. Listen closely to my song. That's the sorting hat's way of going, imagine it's crystal. Listen up. Though condemned I am to, what's the verb? Split you. Why split? Why not sort?
Like the Horcruxes.
Exactly. The sorting hat is saying, I am Horcruxing you.
It's foreshadowing.
Yeah, it's foreshadowing. Okay? But what else? How does he mean, condemned I am to split you?
Divide you from each other.
Okay? Who's the you?
The students.
Keep going. You is a wonderful pronoun. Because it can mean what?
Singular.
It has two uses. Singular, plural. Condemned I am to split you, plural. All you first years who are now what? At this point in the story.
They're all the same.
They're all students at Hogwarts, but they're not Gryffindors, Ravenclaws, Hufflepuffs, Slytherins. So when he says, condemned I am to split you, think of this as you singular and then you plural. What does he mean by you singular? Condemned I am to split you singular, Marissa. What does the sorting hat do when they put the hat on? Okay.
He decides what's the most important thing and cuts them off from the rest of it.
He is splitting them psychologically, let's say. The sorting hat you put the sorting hat on, and what does it determine? It determines your greatest strengths. It splits everything else out. It says all that other stuff, unimportant. What do we learn from Hermione later on? Sorting hat wanted to put her where? In the Ravenclaw. But she said no. Why? Because it's our choices, Harry, that show what we are far more than our abilities, Dumbledore says at the end of book 2. Sorting hat wanted to put Harry where? Slytherin. No, not Slytherin, not Slytherin. Well, then it better be Gryffindor. Okay? So, individually, notice what it's doing. It's kind of taking the totality of a person in whole, which is what a person ought to be, and says what? 51% of you is Gryffindor. 49% of you is Slytherin. Therefore, I'm splitting you. I'm dividing you. What's it doing in splitting and dividing? Making something that is supposed to be whole and complete, what? Fragmented. Fragmented. Okay? When it fragments them, what does it do? It says you're no longer whole and complete. So when they get placed in the houses, it's not because of the entire person. That's why Harry would have done well in Slytherin. That's why Hermione would have done well in Ravenclaw. Where else would Cedric have done well? Gryffindor. Is he bold? Is he daring? Is he chivalrous? Cedric has chivalry in spades. Okay? Ron, do we see a lot of chivalry on Ron's part? Well, we do in the chess match. Though I must fulfill my duty and must quarter every year, still I wonder whether sorting may not bring the end I fear. Notice, must quarter every year. He's talking about here first. Because we have an even number of students come in each first year class. I think it's 5. There are 20 students. 5 for each of the houses. Okay? Hogwarts is not, thousands of students. It's fairly small. Okay? So you've got roughly 20 each year, 5 for each house for each year. Okay? So you got roughly 35 each. I'm pretty sure this is right. Roughly 35 each house total.
Totally comes up different in the movie.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, the movie makes it look like there's
I'm
hundreds.
sure the book doesn't say that because I don't really get that.
Because you got the Gryffindor first years, there's Harry, Ron, Hermione.
Well, it never actually states.
Neville and Seamus.
Yeah, and it may not be 5 total. It might be 5 boys, 5 girls.
That seems more accurate.
Because I'm pretty sure Harry's room.
It would have to be 10.
Yeah, it must be 10. Because in Harry's room, you got Harry, Ron, Neville, Seamus, and Dean. And that's their first year's dorm.
And then you got Hermione,
And then-
Lavender,
yeah.
Pravati.
And her sister,
Actually,
and
she's in-
Lavender.
Pravati, Padma's in Ravenclaw.
They're split up.
That's right. But yeah, I'm pretty sure, so it must be 10 each of the first years. So there's then 70 for each school, so a total of 280 students. Not too big, okay? So, and must quarter every year. That is, I've got to divide these 40 students into 4 houses. But he's also talking about quartering how? Again, the individual. Because there are 4 houses, each individual can be put in. So it's not looking at 50%, as I just alluded to earlier, or 51% Gryffindor. It's maybe you're 26% Gryffindor. Okay? Still, I wonder whether sorting may not bring the end I fear. What's the end the song fears?
School?
Yeah. Destruction of the school. The failure of the school. Keep in mind, the school is, big old castle sitting on what?
4 pillars.
Is it really 4?
1, 3.
I mean, Slytherin left, but yeah, there is a 4th pillar. Okay? And quartering does what? Says, this pillar is better than this pillar is better than this pillar, etc. Know the perils. Read the signs. The warning history shows. For Hogwarts is in danger from external deadly foes. Notice, it's not in danger from within. What's the sorting hat telling them?
Say something outside of the school. Potentially.
It's saying, Gryffindor, Slytherin is not your enemy. Gryffindor, Ravenclaw is not your enemy. Gryffindor, Hufflepuff is not your enemy. Let's extrapolate. Let's extrapolate to today, real world America. One of the Democratic debates. Okay, the candidates were asked. This is back when Martin O'Malley was still in, and I think Jim Webb. The candidates were asked, of what enemies are you most proud that they are your enemies? Anybody remember Hillary Clinton's answer? The Republicans. She was most proud of having Republicans as her enemies. Are Republicans Hillary Clinton's enemies?
Oh, no.
Who, if she has enemies, are her enemies? I would say, frankly, other than herself and her own actions. Who are her enemies? Who are enemies of American citizens?
Those who threaten our lives.
those outside. That's what the sorting hat is saying. It's not people within Hogwarts that are our enemies. Meanwhile, Harry's doing what? He's looking over at the Slytherin table at Draco. Okay? Draco isn't Harry's enemy. Does he come off as Harry's enemy? Yeah. And we must unite inside her, or we'll crumble from within. You know, used to be said, dissent ends where? At the water's edge. When we start talking about foreign policy, Americans unite. America goes to war, America unites. Not anymore. Not anymore. Okay? So what starts to happen, according to the sorting hat? You start to see, like a sinkhole, the ground starts to give from underneath you to where you no longer have any purchase. You no longer have anything firm to stand on. Ron, branched out a bit this year, hasn't it? Too right it has, says Harry. Hermione, I wonder if it's ever given warnings before. Nick, yes indeed. The hat feels honor bound to give the school due warning whenever it feels. And then McGonagall starts talking. We see people sorted, and Ron asked nearly headless Nick, how can it know, page 209, how can it know if the school's in danger if it's a hat? That is, it sits on a shelf somewhere. Well, nearly headless Nick, I have no idea. Of course, it lives in Dumbledore's office. I dare say it picks things up there. What do we come to learn about how the sorting hat picks things up in Dumbledore's office? What characterizes Dumbledore's office? Or, let's rephrase that, the headmaster's office. It's not that it's Dumbledore's office that's important.
Portraits.
The portraits that line the wall. Because what kind of portraits are these? They're living portraits. Okay? What can the portraits do? Possibly. Like Phineas Nigelus's.
Go other places.
They can go other places as long as there's a frame somewhere else for them to go into. Okay? But these portraits do what? They talk. Some of these portraits are of old, much, much earlier headmasters. Okay? Harry, and it wants all the houses to be friends? Looking over at Draco, where he's holding court. Okay, keep in mind, no one is supposed to hold court because there's no royalty. Fat chance. That is, me, Draco, friends, when hell freezes over. And Nick kind of reproves Harry. He says, all us ghosts, we get along. And Harry says, it's because you're afraid of the, I almost said Red Baron. Ron says, because you're afraid of the Bloody Baron. Okay? Skip a bit. Umbridge starts to spout. She starts to speak. And I'm not going to go over Umbridge's speech, but it's a lot of, how do I want to put this? Educational jargon. It's a lot of theory speak. Okay? She finishes speaking, page 214, and Hermione says, well, that certainly was illuminating. Ron, you're not telling me you enjoyed it. I said illuminating, not enjoyable. Notice, what's the difference between illuminating and enjoyable? What does to illuminate mean? Means to shine the light on. To make clear. Ron takes that to mean that she liked it. It explained a lot. Harry, did it? Sounded like a load of waffle to me. That is, a lot of educational gobbledygook. Hermione, well, there is some important stuff hidden in the waffle. Really? Ron? Really? Was there? How about progress for progress' sake must be discouraged? How about pruning wherever we find practices that ought to be prohibited? Ron, what does that mean? I'll tell you what it means. It means the ministry is interfering at Hogwarts. That is, pruning wherever we find practices that ought to be prohibited. What kind of practices, books 1 through 4, okay, is Umbridge suggesting ought to be prohibited?
Dark arts.
Do they practice dark arts?
Defense against the dark arts. Practical defense against the dark arts.
Practical defense against the dark arts. I mean, after all, what did crazy Professor Moody teach them the previous year? The unforgivable curses and how to overcome the imperious curse. Okay?
Why did you think about that? That's kind of
Yeah. Well, think about it for a moment. Why might Umbridge not want to teach them actual practical aspects of defense against the dark arts? Because she's secretly a dark wizard? No. Sirius is going to say shortly, no, she's not a dark wizard. She's not a Death Eater. But he's going to say that within the context of the world isn't divided between Death Eaters and good guys.
Yeah, I was going to say, just because she's a Death Eater, I don't know if that necessarily means she's not a dark wizard.
You mean just because she's not a Death Eater?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just because she's not a Death Eater. She can still be a dark wizard. I would dare say that quill is black magic.
Really? Think about it for a moment. When Harry gets detention, I must not tell lies. It writes it where?
On the back of his hand.
On the back of his hand. Okay? Does inflicting pain mean that you're necessarily a dark wizard?
No.
If you enjoy it that much. She's a sadist.
Towards the end of the novel, to jump to the end, Harry attempts to use the Cruciatus curse on Bellatrix Lestrange. What does she tell him?
You have to mean it.
Never used one of the unforgivable curses before, have you, boy? She calls him boy. Okay? She says, you have to mean it. You have to, what does she mean by mean it? She says, righteous anger won't do it. Very interesting that she calls his anger there righteous. Like he has a right to be angry over the death of Sirius. Sorry to give that away if you haven't gotten there. So righteous anger won't do it. You have to enjoy it, which means you have to take pleasure in inflicting pain in others. Okay? Book 7, Harry's going to do the Cruciatus curse on one of the Carrow twins. And he's going to go, ugh, she was right. You do have to enjoy it. Okay, what does that mean? In that scene in book 7, it means Harry wants to enjoy inflicting pain on, I think it's Electo, Carrow. Why? Because Carrow spat in McGonagall's face. Why does Harry want to enjoy inflicting pain? This is the chivalrous part of him coming out. He's coming to McGonagall's defense. Is McGonagall defenseless?
No.
Hell no. McGonagall's never defenseless. Except when she has a whole bunch of people cursing her. And she gets sent to the hospital for it. All right? So, Harry goes on up to his room that night, and what happens? We find out Seamus Finnegan is no longer as good a friend as Harry once thought he was. Why? Because his mother reads the Daily Prophet, and she believes it. What does this tell us about Seamus Finnegan's mother? She's an idiot. She's a dolt.
She just believes everything she reads.
Let's modify that a little bit. What does she believe?
She believes in what the government lies.
She believes in what the government and the media say. Because there are apparently, other than, the wireless network, the radio, there's only what other media, apparently?
Prophet.
You've got the Daily Prophet and, okay, let's put these in real world terms. What's the equivalent of the Daily Prophet in our world?
New York Times?
New York Times. As worthless a rag as there ever was. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. But it is. What else?
Washington Post?
Washington Post, LA Times, Miami Herald, Chicago Tribune, San Francisco Chronicle, okay, the major newspapers. We're talking in the United States. If we were talking in England, this would be the Sunday Times, right? Daily Telegraph, probably the Guardian. It's no longer published as a newspaper now, but the Independent, okay? Quibbler,
National Enquirer?
National Enquirer. Okay. The same day that we're told to believe the story about Ted Cruz and his 5 mistresses. I've never talked to a woman who has said she'd want to have sex with Ted Cruz, so you can do that on your own. The same issue that had the story about Ted Cruz and his 5 mistresses, the National Enquirer had another story about the death of Antonin Scalia, the Supreme Court Justice. It alleged in this story that Antonin Scalia was killed by the CIA that hired a Mexican prostitute for $2,000 an hour to poison him. Thus, the family's refusal to have an autopsy. So, believe the story about Ted Cruz, believe the story about Scalia. Don't believe the story about Scalia, don't believe the story about Cruz, or believe one and not believe the other. Now, it is true, the National Enquirer has broken some true stories in the past. John Edwards, Gary Hart, and there was another one. All sex scandals, okay? What else? If we're going to England, the Daily Mail, okay, the Sun, and about a dozen other rags, okay? Things that have sensational stories. You know, the Star in the United States usually has things about, you know, aliens on Mars and or people, Elvis being sighted on Mars and stuff like that. Okay? Seamus Finnegan's mother believes this, which means
She's a rational person.
she would believe all this. Okay? She would be like, I used to be able to say, 70% of most Americans. But most Americans no longer believe in these. Why? Because we've been lied to too much. Most Americans, I mean, this is one of the problems of the United States today, is our institutions have been corrupt or corrupted. The Catholic Church, the priest scandal, okay? Newspapers, all kinds of scandals. Government, pick your scandal. So, Harry goes upstairs, and because Seamus Finnegan's mother believes what she reads in the Daily Prophet, Seamus does. He believes what his mother believes, essentially. Neville, page 219. My grand says that's rubbish. Notice, piped up Neville. Did anybody ask Neville's opinion? So what's he doing?
He's defending.
He's defending Harry. She says it's the Daily Prophet that's going downhill, not Dumbledore. She's canceled our subscription. We believe Harry, which, by the way, is happening to all of these. They're losing subscribers daily. That's why this one in England went out of print. It is now only an online publication. Okay? All newspapers are suffering this, which is why, for example, most of these, you get a certain number of free articles a month, and then you have to pay for them. Okay? But you're going to see, what you're going to see, is people aren't going to be willing to pay for them. Why? They can get the information other places. It's an economic model that's, 50 years out of date. We believe Harry. My grand's always said, you know who would come back one day. She says if Dumbledore says he's back, he's back. Harry felt a rush of gratitude toward Neville. Nobody else said anything. Seamus got out his wand, repaired the bed hangings, vanished behind him. Notice Dean gets into bed, kind of, not saying much, other than my parents are muggles, mate. They don't know nothing about no deaths at Hogwarts because I'm not stupid enough to tell them. All right? Then we get Professor Umbridge. Next chapter. I'm going to skip a bunch. And they go off to Defense Against the Dark Arts, page 239. And we have written on the board, and notice the nice, beautiful handwriting, Defense Against the Dark Arts, a return to basic principles. All right. And she says, now we will be following a carefully structured, theory-centered, ministry-approved course of defensive magic this year. Copy down the following, please. What does she mean, a carefully structured, theory-centered, ministry-approved course of defensive magic? Page 239.
The common core of the limited world.
That's exactly what she's talking about. Okay? So here's the course aims. Professors at MTSU are told that we ought to have course objectives on all of our syllabi. Because I'm a stick in the mud and I don't like being told what to do, I usually don't include them. I don't include stuff about lottery statements, about financial aid, because you're all adults. Figure it out on your own. Okay? Course aims. Understanding the principles underlying defensive magic. Well, gee, what would those be? How long would it take to learn those principles? Use defensive magic when?
When someone's trying to attack you.
When needed. There's the principle underlying the use of defensive magic. Okay? Learning to recognize situations in which defensive magic can legally be used. Placing the use of defensive magic in a context for practical use. Oh, she is a wild progressive because everything needs to be contextualized. Here's an example. Have you heard about what happened at Emory University last week? Anybody? I don't think any of you are precious little snowflakes, so I'm going to put this on the board. If it makes you faint, I don't apologize, because you shouldn't be here. Okay? Somebody went around campus with chalk and wrote this. Trump 2016. They wrote it on sidewalks. They wrote it on sides of brick walls, fences, and they wrote it on some building walls. And the campus has been turned upside down. Because a lot of people felt threatened by this. Okay, I am not a Trump supporter. But if you're threatened by this, not by Donald Trump coming to campus, but by the words, Trump 2016. So people went to the president, and the president said he would launch an investigation. He would use surveillance cameras that are on Emory's campus to find out who the people were who did the chalkings, and if they were students, they would be disciplined. And if they were not students, they would be charged with felony trespass and vandalism.
Because of some chalk.
Yeah. What's going to happen the next rainy day?
Gone.
It's gone. Okay?
Maintenance can just go wash it.
A vice president / dean of students then took to the academic journal Inside Higher Ed and wrote a long opinion piece about why we need to understand and contextualize the students' anger and frustration at this. Okay? And by doing that, he just not pulled the lid off the can of worms, he blew apart a can of worms. Because every comment on that online posting, every comment is ridiculing this dean of students for essentially showing himself to be one of the students who is traumatized by this. Okay?
They read Calling of the American Mind by the Atlantic. Really good article.
Oh yeah, it is. So, basics for beginners. No need to talk. Read your books. Just read. This is teaching. Just read. So, Hermione has a question. Do you have a question about the chapter, Hermione? No, not about the chapter. Well, we're reading just now, so, I've got a question about your course names. Really? There's nothing written about using defensive spells. Using defensive spells. Well, I can't imagine, page 242, why any situation where you'd be required to use a defensive spell. We're not going to use magic, Ron says. Hands. You wanted to ask something else, Miss Granger? Surely the whole point of defense against the dark arts is to practice defensive spells. Are you a ministry-trained educational expert? Is Dolores Jane Umbridge a ministry-trained educational expert?
No.
No, she's the senior undersecretary to Fudge. Okay. What do they have to do at the end of their 5th year?
Think they're out.
They have to take their owls, their ordinary wizarding levels. What is a component of each owl?
You have to
Practical.
You have theoretical, kind of objective knowledge, and
the practical.
practical. It's like when you go to get your driver's license. What do? You take the written test, and then you get behind the wheel of a car. So it'd be like taking my 16-year-old daughter who's driven, I don't know, a couple dozen times, but not much, and she doesn't want to drive. But it'd be like taking her to take the test, and she could probably ace the test, the written test. But taking her to get her driver's portion of the test now. Okay? So, bottom of 243, she says, it's the view of the ministry that a theoretical knowledge will be more than sufficient to get you through the examination, which, after all, is what school is all about. Now, this is published in 2003. Okay? 13 years ago. Not necessarily long before, but it's kind of at the forefront of this whole idea that school is all about what?
Tests.
Testing. Testing. That's what she's saying. School isn't about learning. It's about testing. It's about how to do well on exams. What's the purpose of doing well on exams for our real world?
Making money. It's cool.
So that the school gets more money from the state and federal government. It's not so that the school comes out looking better. Okay? So, Harry finally intervenes. And to cut to chase, what does Harry do? He mentions Voldemort's name in class, which is like a swear word. So he gets detention. And he keeps going. So that she writes a little note and has Harry take it to McGonagall. This comes after he tells her to shut up. Okay? So he takes the note off to McGonagall, page 248. And she says, misbehavior in Dolores Umbridge's class could cost you much more than house points in the detention. What do you, Potter? Use your common sense. Okay? What was Harry not showing in Defense Against the Dark Arts? What was he not practicing?
Restraint.
Restraint. What's the phrase we used earlier? Self-control. Okay? Use your common sense. You know where she comes from. You must know to whom she's reporting. She's giving you detention every evening this week, starting tomorrow. So, every evening this week, does that mean just Monday through Friday? Or is it every evening? Couldn't you? No, I couldn't. But she's your teacher. She has every right to give you detention. You will go to her room at 5 o'clock tomorrow for the first one. Just remember, tread carefully around Dolores Umbridge. But I was telling the truth. For heaven's sake, Potter, do you really think this is about truth or lies? Notice, when Harry appeals that he was telling the truth, what's he appealing to? Theory. The very same thing Umbridge says she's going to teach them. McGonagall brings it down to what level? Practical. Real world. It's about keeping your head down and your temper under control. Why it's about keeping his head down? so he doesn't get it blown off. Okay? So he goes off to detention with Dolores. And what happens? He writes his lines, and he sees it on his hand. Does he tell anybody? Not initially. Okay? So, 268. She looks at the line on his hand, says, "Tut tut. I don't seem to have made much of an impression yet. We'll just have to try again tomorrow evening, won't we? You may go." Okay. Harry goes back the next night. Okay. The "I must not tell lies" is showing more clearly now, dropping with little drops of blood. Finally, 272, Ron and Hermione notice the cut on the back of his hand. Okay. Let's skip a bit. 275, he goes back again. She reaches out to him, and he feels this pain across his forehead. The only time he feels pain on his scar is when Voldemort's near. So he starts to wonder, is she somehow tied to Voldemort? Then we get to chapter Percy and Padfoot. Okay. He writes to Sirius, and I'm going to skip a bunch again, just because we need to get through this material. And Ron gets a long letter from Percy, in which Percy proves that he is a what? Use whatever language you want to use.
He's an asshole.
Okay? He's an asshole. Percy's an idiot. Because what does he say in the letter?
That Ron needs to believe in the ministry and not.
Okay?
Stop hanging out with Harry.
Stop hanging around with Harry, as he calls him, the Potter boy.
Horribly.
As if Percy doesn't know him personally. Okay? What did Percy do when Harry was sorted into Gryffindor? We got Potter, you know. Okay? What else?
I love that Harry says, "I must admit that I've always been afraid you would take what we might call the Fred and George route rather than following in my footsteps."
Okay? So, he says, page 297, "It may be that you're afraid to sever ties with Potter. I know that he can be unbalanced and, for all I know, violent." How does he know that? Because that's what the Ministry of Magic and the Daily Prophet's been saying. "But if you have any worries about this, I urge you to speak to Dolores Umbridge, a really delightful woman, who I know will be only too happy to advise you." Which leads me to another bit of advice. What does he say? Distance yourself from Dumbledore. His regime at Hogwarts. Whenever somebody refers to somebody else's rule or authority as a regime, what are they suggesting? It's like when Rush Limbaugh calls Obama's regime, that somehow it's not quite up to snuff. It's not quite legitimate. Okay? Your loyalty, Ron, should not be to him, but to the school and the ministry. Notice, who is Ron's father loyal to?
Dumbledore.
Dumbledore. Okay. So think over what I've said. What does Ron do? Takes the letter and he crumples it up in pieces. Crumples it up and throws it away. Okay? Sirius's head shows up in the fireplace. And page 302, they talk a little bit about Umbridge. And Harry says, "So you don't think my scar hurting had anything to do with Umbridge touching me when I was in detention with her?" "I doubt it. I know her by reputation. I'm sure she's no Death Eater. She's foul enough to be one. Yes, but the world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters. I know she's a nasty piece of work, though you should hear Remus talk about her." Does Lupin know her? No, but she drafted a bit of anti-werewolf legislation 2 years ago that makes it almost impossible for him to get a job. Umbridge is the magical version of what?
An activist.
Louder?
An activist.
Okay, what else? She's a magical version kind of somebody else in the novels. The Dursleys. Just as the Dursleys want nothing to do with anybody who's not a muggle, Umbridge wants nothing to do with anybody who's not full-blooded witch or wizard. Okay? What's she got against werewolves? Scared of them, I expect. Apparently she loathes part humans. She campaigned to have mer people rounded up and tagged. Notice, tagged last year. Put a metal tag on them. Or like Jews in the Second World War with their tattoos. Imagine wasting your time and energy persecuting mer people when they're little toe rags like Creature on the loose. Sirius, says Hermione. Okay. So, they tell Sirius they're not learning defense against the dark arts and such, and then we see this hand come and Sirius leaves. So, we get the Hogwarts High Inquisitor. And we read about the immediate success that she has had at Hogwarts in revolutionizing defense against the dark arts and such. Let's see here. Let me skip a bunch. Harry gets detention again. He goes and speaks to McGonagall, 319. She tells him to get a grip on himself, that is, to practice some self-control. And we see what is Umbridge doing in her role as High Inquisitor. She's evaluating the student, the faculty. She's doing classroom observations. Okay? Who does she listen to when she does Hagrid's? Malfoy's like, oh, a year ago, I was hurt by this. Okay. Page 325 and 326. Hermione broaches an idea to Harry. Hermione and Ron, actually. She says, we're not learning defense against the dark arts. Bottom of 325. We've gone past the stage where we can just learn things out of books. We need a teacher, a proper one, who can show us how to use the spells and correct us if we're going wrong. Look, if you're talking about Lupin. No, I'm not talking about Lupin. Well, who then? I'm talking about you, Harry. There's silence. About me what? I'm talking about you teaching us defense against the dark arts. Ron, that's an idea. What's an idea? Harry's pretty dense here. You teaching us to do it. But I'm not a teacher. I can't hear your best in the ear. He says, no, I'm not. You are. She says, no. When we actually took a test, you did better. Okay? Hermione, look at what you've done. Bottom of 326. Now, when Harry showed up at number 12 Grimmauld Place, and he goes off to the room by himself after he finds out Ron and Hermione are made prefects, what's he doing in his mind? Why did they get made? Why did Ron get made prefect? When I'm the one who's had to do all this stuff. Ron, you know what? I'm not so sure I want someone this stupid teaching me. Let's think, he says, pulling a face. First year, you saved the stone from, that was luck. That wasn't skill. Was it? Okay, Ron and Hermione help Harry get past the obstacles. But it's Harry alone in the chamber with the mirror. He'd been taught how the mirror works. But he hadn't been taught that only someone who wants to save the stone and not use it for himself would be able to get the stone. It's Harry's innate goodness that enables him to get the stone. Second year, Ron says, you killed the basilisk and destroyed Giddle. Yeah, but if Fawkes hadn't turned up, yeah. But what did Harry do to get Fawkes to turn up?
You had to believe in Dumbledore.
Help me, somebody, help me. And what else before that?
Show loyalty to the school.
Not to school, to Dumbledore. Because the shadow version of Voldemort says, the great, when I, the greatest wizard who ever lived, and he says, sorry about that, but you're not the greatest sorcerer. Everyone knows you're afraid of Dumbledore. Showing loyalty to Dumbledore. Third year, you fought off about 100 Dementors at once. You know that was a fluke if the Time Turner hadn't. Was it a fluke? Okay, yeah, he did have the Time Turner. It did take him back in time. He did see himself and Ron and Hermione about to get soul sucked by the Dementors. But he still produced the Patronus. Ron, last year, you fought off you-know-who again. Now Harry, angrily. Listen to me, all right? Sounds great when you say it like that, but all that stuff was luck. I didn't know what I was doing half the time. I didn't plan any of it. I just did whatever I could think of, and I nearly always had help. Don't sit there grinning like you know better than I do. I was there, wasn't I? I know what went on all right. I didn't get through any of that because I was brilliant at defense against the dark arts. I got through it all because help came at the right time, or because I guessed right. I just blundered through it all, and they're laughing at him. You don't know what it's like. Neither of you. You've never had to face him, have you? It's like, hello, listen to yourself. You think it's just memorizing a bunch of spells and throwing them at him like you're in class or something? How many different spells does Harry try to use against Voldemort? One. The whole time you're sure, you know there's nothing between you and dying except your own brain or guts or whatever. Your own, how does Gandalf put it? Heart, wits, and strength. Like you can think straight when you know you're about a second from being murdered or tortured or watching your friends die. Okay? But notice, in everything Harry says, notice what he never admits to. He never admits to a fear of dying. Yeah, he's trying to stop from being killed. But he never says being afraid of dying. Hermione, Ron, we weren't saying anything like that. Harry, don't you see, Hermione says, this is why we need you. Because we need to know what it's really like. She's forcing herself because she's getting ready to say the name. She's never said it before. Facing Voldemort. It was the first time she had ever said Voldemort's name, and it was this more than anything else that calmed Harry. Think about it. Okay? So, they go off to the Hogshead during Hogsmeade. Why Hogshead and not the Three Broomsticks? Three Broomsticks is busy. Hogshead isn't. Hogshead's kind of this derelict, shady place. Not many people go into. So Hermione thinks, well, this would be the perfect place for a meeting. Rather than in open, in public, where everybody is around. Okay? So 332. She says, well, what do you think? Will you teach us just you and Ron? Yeah, well, maybe a few others. So they go off to Hogsmeade and to the Hogshead. And page 337. Harry asks, so who did you say is supposed to be meeting us? Oh, just a couple of people. Told them to be here about now. Looks at her watch. Oh, look, this might be them now. The door of the pub opens. How many people ultimately come in?
25.
Yes, total of 25. Plus Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Couple of people. Hermione has a strange sense of couple. We get Neville, Dean, Lavender, followed closely by Parvati and Padma. So notice, not just Gryffindors. Cho, one of her usually giggling girlfriends. Luna, Katie Bell, Alicia Spinnet, Angelina Johnson. Why Katie, Alicia, and Angelina? Quidditch team, okay. Colin and Dennis Creevy, because they idolize Harry. Ernie McMillan, because he didn't trust Harry in book 2, and now he does. Justin Finch Fletchley, same reason. Hannah Abbott, this is the same Abbott whose last name we heard when Mad Eye Moody pulled out that photograph. Okay. A Hufflepuff girl with long plate down her back whose name Harry did not know. 3 Ravenclaw boys he was pretty sure were Anthony Goldstein, so notice there are Jews at Hogwarts. Michael Corner and Terry Boot. Ginny, followed by a tall, skinny blonde boy with an upturned nose, whom Harry recognized vaguely as being a member of the Hufflepuff Quidditch team. And bringing up the rear, Fred and George Weasley with their friend Lee Jordan. Harry, a couple of people. So, Hermione kind of says, here's what we're here for. And notice who wants to pump Harry for information about the night Cedric died. Page 340. The blonde Hufflepuff player. Cedric was team captain. Hermione says, Dumbledore believes it. You mean Dumbledore believes him. Ron, who are you? Zachariah Smith. I think we've got the right to know exactly what makes him say you know who's back. Harry says, it's okay, Hermione. What makes me say you know who's back? I saw him. But Dumbledore told the whole school what happened last year. If you don't believe him, you don't believe me, and I'm not wasting the afternoon trying to convince you. Go away. Well, all Dumbledore said was last year Diggory got killed by you-know-who, and that you brought Diggory's body back to Hogwarts. He didn't give us details. Harry, if you've come to hear exactly what it looks like when Voldemort murders someone, I can't help you. Can't or won't? I don't want to talk about Cedric Diggory, all right? So if that's what we're here for, you might as well clear out. Okay? And the girl with the long plate down her back says, is it true you can produce a Patronus? Yeah. A corporeal Patronus? Harry, you don't know Madam Bones, do you? She's my auntie. I'm Susan Bones. Okay? Again, Bones is a name we saw associated with the First Order of the Phoenix. Edgar Bones and his whole family were wiped out, we were told. She told me about you, Harry, so is it really true? You make a stag Patronus? Yes. Lee, blimey, Harry, 2 years older than Harry. I never knew that. Fred, Mom told Ron not to spread it around, grinning at Harry. Why is Fred grinning? Not only because Harry's totally cool, but Fred's like, yeah, we're friends. It rubs off, as it were. Harry, she's not wrong. That is, I do get too much attention. Terry Booton, did you kill a basilisk with that sword in Dumbledore's office? It's one of the portraits on the wall told me. Yeah. And in our first year, said Neville, he saved the Sorcerer's Stone. Poor old Neville just can't quite get it right. Sorcerers, hisses Hermione. Yeah, that. Cho, and that's not to mention all the tasks he had to get through in the Tri-Wizard tournament. Yeah, but he cheated at all of those. And that helped. Okay? Harry, I had help with a lot of that stuff. Michael Corner, not with that dragon you did, and that was a seriously cool bit of flying. Yeah, well, Susan Bones, and nobody helped you get rid of those Dementors this summer. Do you think everybody else knows about the Dementors?
No.
Okay. So what does that tell us about Madam Bones?
She likes to talk.
She tells her, what, 15-year-old niece?
She's a Harry supporter, basically.
She's a Harry supporter. Zachariah Smith, are you trying to weasel out of teaching us? Ron, here's an idea. Why don't you shut your mouth? Okay. Fred and George, would you like us to clean out your ears for you? pulling out a long and lethal-looking metal instrument from inside one of the Zonko's bags, you know. So, they agree for Harry to teach them. And we're going to skip a bit. We get Educational Decree 24. All student organizations, societies, teams, groups, clubs henceforth disbanded. Notice, there cannot be any organization, society, team, group, or club regularly defined as a meeting of 3 or more students. I'm not positive about this, but I think J.K. Rowling gets this straight out of real world history. You have laws on the books in North Korea about that. You can't have a meeting of 3 or more people. China used to. Soviet Union had them. Why?
Because the government started a revolt.
Yes. That's how rebellions begin. Okay? So what does this obviously tell us?
She was a veiled witch in Hogshead.
Okay?
That she had someone tell her she was listening somehow.
She knows. She knows. So, they have their first meeting, and Dobby finds Harry the room of requirement. Let's see here.
So I just have a question. Like,
Yeah.
Why was Umbridge just hanging out in the Hogshead?
Was she?
Well, I mean, that's what we assume because of the, hang on.
I feel like the same thing as Mundungus, like.
The one you're thinking of, yeah, that's not her, that's
Right, it is
Mundungus.
Mundungus.
The
Okay.
one as the witch? Yeah, that's
That
Mundungus
is
Fletcher.
Mundungus, you're
But
right.
I feel like Umbridge had somebody in the Hogshead most likely, like that's what I would do if I was in Umbridge's shoes. I'd have somebody in the broomsticks, somebody in the Hogshead, clearing out whenever students go.
Or, I mean, what do we find out later?
Cho's friend is,
The giggling one.
yeah, tells Umbridge what's going on.
Might she not have
Yeah.
already been an informant? Okay. Okay, so we see Umbridge going about her duties of investigating teachers and such. We find out, page 363, that Snape's been teaching at Hogwarts for how long?
14 years.
14 years. How old's Harry? 15. So it's not since Harry's birth, but since when?
His parents
His parents
died.
does.
And Voldemort's fall from power. Okay. You applied first for the Defense Against the Dark Arts? Yes. But you were unsuccessful? Obviously. Because after all, if he hadn't been unsuccessful, what would he be teaching?
I love that part in the movie. They did it perfectly.
And you've applied regularly for the Defense Against the Dark Arts post since you first joined the school, I believe. Notice what that tells us. For 14 years, how often has there been an opening for Defense Against the Dark Arts?
Every year since Voldemort didn't.
Every-
Wasn't it in Kids?
It's not every year since Voldemort applied for the job. Voldemort applied for the job just a few years after he left Hogwarts.
I thought it was the second time he did it. But
Alright.
that's what it said in book 6.
We'll see when we get to it. So she keeps talking and such. Let's skip a little bit more. We see Trelawney's questioning. They have a talk with Sirius again. Sirius says, really, Hogshead, that wasn't very smart. And then we get Dumbledore's army. It's the room of requirement. Okay? Harry requires a room for what purposes?
Actually practice.
To teach Defense Against the Dark Arts. So they get in the room, and what does it have? It's essentially a library, and the walls are covered with books all about Defense Against the Dark Arts. What else is there in the room?
Cushions.
Pillows and cushions. Why?
So when they
Are you stunned?
So when you get stunned, you're going to fall and not hit your head against a hard ground, stone floor. Okay? So, skip a bit. Page 391 and following. They need to come up with a name for themselves. The Anti-Umbrage League, and, Jenny suggests, Cho suggests, Defense Association, page 392. Jenny says, yeah, DA's good, but let's make it Dumbledore's Army. Why? Because that's what Fudge fears. So let's play on that fear. So, Dumbledore's Army, and this is where Hermione makes her fatal mistake. Everybody's names, a class roster. Okay? So, Harry starts teaching them Expelliarmus, page 392. Oh, please, Zachariah Smith again. I don't think Expelliarmus is exactly going to help us against you-know-who, do you? Harry, I've used it against him. Saved my life last June. Smith opened his mouth stupidly. But if you think it's beneath you, you can leave. So, we start seeing Expelliarmus and people's wands getting shot up in the air and stuff. Expelliarmus, said Neville. And Harry, caught unawares, felt his wand fly out of his hand. I did it, said Neville. Why is this significant?
Because no one normally sucks at most things and he finally
He
did
has no
something right.
confidence.
He's gaining confidence. Notice, he does it. Okay? Good one, said Harry. Notice, deciding not to point out that in a real duel situation, Neville's opponent was unlikely to be staring in the opposite direction with his wand held loosely at his side. In other words, Neville used Expelliarmus on what? Harry's back. He shot him in the back. Okay? But Harry gives Neville his moment of glory. Okay? So, we get the Lion and the Serpent. Let's skip a bunch again. Trying to get up to page 500 something. And we see Malfoy and how Malfoy has done the little thing with the button and come up with a song. Weasley is our king, Weasley is our king. He always lets the quaffle in, Weasley is our king and such. And you just gotta love Luna at this point, coming up with the big lion head thing. And we get Hagrid's tail. Where's Hagrid been? Got 17 minutes to go. He's been with Madame Maxime. On what? A mission to the Giants.
Very long mission.
Very long mission. We're not exactly told where the Giants, but you get this idea. It's off in Russia or something. How successful was the mission?
Not successful.
Not. Why?
Because when they finally got First Leader, he got killed by a different person and he wasn't so supportive of the normal people in the district.
Okay, but ultimately, why? Voldemort got there first. Voldemort sent emissaries also. Okay, what can Dumbledore promise the Giants? Can he promise them safe return to England? What can Voldemort promise them?
Wherever they pick wherever they want.
Bodies, flesh. Okay, giants are supposed to be carnivores. It's implied human carnivores. So, Hagrid's back now. We get the Eye of the Snake. She's writing about Hagrid's, exam, page 447, that he can't keep his thoughts straight, mumble, show signs of pleasure at idea of violence and such. They have another Defense Against the Dark Arts lesson, page 455. Following, Harry's left with Cho alone. And she starts talking about Cedric and crying and, they have a wet slobbery kiss. Pick up with, he goes up to his room and he tells Ron and Hermione, actually goes back, tells Ron and Hermione, page 459, one of my favorite spots in this whole book. Hermione explains to Harry how Cho is feeling. Page 459. Ron asks, what sort of person cries while someone's kissing them? Harry, yeah, who does? Don't you understand how Cho's feeling? No. Well, she's feeling very sad because of Cedric dying. Then I expect she's feeling confused because she likes Cedric, and now she likes Harry, and she can't work out who she likes best. Okay, guy's perspective here, but Cedric's dead. Never mind that. Then she'll be feeling guilty, thinking it's an insult to Cedric's memory to be kissing Harry at all. She'll be worrying about how what everyone else might say about her if she starts going out with Harry. And she probably can't work out what her feelings toward Harry are anyway, because here's when it was Cedric, when Cedric died. So that's all very mixed up and painful. Oh, and she's painful she's going to be thrown off the Ravenclaw Quidditch team because she's been flying so badly. Ron, one person can't feel all that at once. They'd explode. Just because you've got the emotional range of a teaspoon doesn't mean we all have. What about Harry? Emotional range of a teaspoon? Maybe a tablespoon. Okay? Harry, she started it! Notice that language, what that implies, like it was a battle. Okay? She just sort of came at me. Okay? Harry has this dream. It's the eye of the snake. He goes off to Dumbledore's office. Pages 468. Dumbledore asks Harry, how did you see this? Because he wakes up and he's screaming, Mr. Weasley, he's in danger, he's covered in blood. How did you see this? I don't know. Inside my head, no, you misunderstand me. Where were you? Were you perhaps standing beside the victim, looking down on the scene from above? He's asking, what was your point of view? I was the snake. Okay. That makes the dream a whole lot more real, right? I saw it all from the snake's point of view. Is Arthur seriously injured? Yes. Okay. So Dumbledore starts talking to the portraits. He tells Harry and Ron to sit down, and I'm going to skip a bunch again. He tells McGonagall to get the other Weasley children. Okay. He speaks to Phineas Nigellus. He says, "Go to the other portrait. I've got a message." Okay. Page 473 at the bottom. Your father's been injured in the course of his work for the Order of the Phoenix. He's been taken to St. Mungo's. I'm sending you back to Sirius's house, which is much more convenient for the hospital than the Burrow. You'll meet your mother there. Fred, how are we going? Dumbledore. Flu powder's not safe at the moment. You'll be taking a port key. Okay, we're just waiting for Phineas Nigellus to report back. Okay, so you've all used a port key before, page 474. Good. On the count of 3, then 1, 2. And for a moment, Harry looks up into Dumbledore's eyes, and Dumbledore's clear blue gaze moved from the port key to Harry's face, and Harry's scar burns white hot. And Harry thinks, I want to bite him. And he's taken off to number 12, Grimmauld Place. Okay? We find out Mr. Weasley's still alive, but he's in kind of bad condition, bad shape. And pick up with, they go off to St. Mungo's. How much time? 2 minutes. They meet Mr. Weasley. Okay. And page 491. Fred and George pull out their extendable ears so Harry can listen to the conversation of the Order of the Phoenix around Arthur Weasley in his hospital bed. Molly, you know, Dumbledore seems almost to have been waiting for Harry to see something like this. Moody, yeah, well, something funny about the pocket kid. We all know that. Of course he's worried. The boy's seeing things from inside you-know-who's snake. If you know who's possessing him, and Harry pulls the ears out. Okay? They go back home to number 12. Harry goes to his room and he starts packing. And Phineas Nigellus starts to talk to him. Okay? And what does Phineas Nigellus say? Bottom of 495. You know, this is precisely why I loathed being a teacher. Young people are so infernally convinced that they are absolutely right about everything. Has it not occurred to you, my poor puffed up popinjay, there might be an excellent reason why the headmaster of Hogwarts is not confiding every tiny detail of his plans to you? And we can just jump right to book 7. Have you never paused while feeling hard done by to note that following Dumbledore's orders has never yet led you into harm? No, like all young people, you're quite sure that you alone feel and think, you alone recognize danger, you alone are the only one clever enough to realize what the Dark Lord may be planning. Okay? So, page 499. Ron, Hermione, Ginny come up because Harry's been keeping to himself. Why? What's he thinking?
That they're afraid of him now.
That they're afraid of him, that he's being possessed. And Ginny's like, hello, Harry. Who do you know that's been possessed by Lord Voldemort before? You. And she says, you have any times where you can't remember what you've been doing? Big blank periods where you don't know what you were up to? No. Then you're not being possessed by you-know-who. Okay. Notice, Jenny lives with that. She hasn't had her mind wiped, so she's forgotten all of it. Okay. So, they find Creature's bedroom because Hermione wants to leave him a present. And what do they find in Creature's little bedroom? His nice little cozy den. A picture of Bellatrix Lestrange. Almost like she's his goddess. Okay. Page 504. Harry says, I haven't seen him since the night we came back here. You were ordering him out of the kitchen. Serious. Yeah, I think that's the last time I saw him too. He must be hiding upstairs. Harry, he couldn't have left, could he? I mean, when you said out, maybe he thought you meant get out of the house? No, house elves can't leave unless they've given clothes, because they're tied to their family's house. Not quite true. They can't leave somebody's employ unless they've been given clothes. What are they ordered to do? Follow orders. Get out! What does that leave Creature free to do?
To get out of the house.
To interpret what it means. All right? So, they go off to the closed ward. They run into Lockhart. And then, page 512 and 513. They see Neville. Ron, just Neville? Who have you been visiting? Neville's grandmother comes down. Friends of yours, Neville dear? And she says, yes, I know who you are, of course. Neville speaks highly of you. Harry, thanks. You two are clearly Weasleys. Yes, I know your parents, and you must be Hermione Granger. Neville's told me all about you. He's a good boy, but he hasn't got his father's talent, I'm afraid to say. She jerks her head towards the end of the ward. 2 beds. What? Is that your dad down at the end, Neville? What's this? Haven't you told your friends about your parents, Neville? Neville shakes his head. It's nothing to be ashamed of. You should be proud, Neville, proud. They didn't give their health and their sanity, so their only son would be ashamed of them, I'm not ashamed. Okay? You've got a funny way of showing it. My son and his wife. She says, they were aurors, very well respected within the wizarding community. Highly gifted, the pair of them. And old Mrs. Longbottom comes ambling down the hallway. Yes, yes, Alice dear, what is it? She no longer had the plump, happy-looking face Harry had seen in Moody's old photograph of the original Order of the Phoenix. Her face was thin and worn now, her eyes seemed overlarge, and her hair, which had turned white, was wispy and dead-looking. She holds something out to Neville, a little piece of paper. Very well, Alice dear, very well. Neville, take it, whatever it is. Neville had already taken it, put it in his pocket. What was it? An empty Drubel's blowing gum wrapper. Very nice, dear. Neville says, thanks, Mom. Mrs. Longbottom turns around, shuffles off back down to where her bed is. Hermione says, I never knew. Ron, nor did I. Ginny, nor me. I did, Harry says. Dumbledore told me, but I promised I wouldn't mention it. That's what Bellatrix Lestrange got sent to Azkaban for, using the Cruciatus curse on Neville's parents until they lost their minds. Hermione, Bellatrix Lestrange did that? That woman creature's got a photo of in his den? Okay. What day is it? Look at the chapter. Christmas on the Closed Ward. What has Alice Longbottom just done?
Given Neville a present.
She's given Neville a Christmas present. It's a piece of trash. But for Neville, what is it?
It means she knows who he is.
It's the most important thing in the world. How often has she done this?
Every time they go to the ward.
Yeah, it seems like it's a regular occurrence.
She must have given you enough of them to paper your bedroom by now. But as they left, Harry was sure he saw Neville slip the wrapper into his pocket. And Neville has done what? He's kept every single one. This is the only connection he has with his parents. Yeah, his mother has the equivalent of Alzheimer's. My mom died of Alzheimer's in early January. When somebody has Alzheimer's, they stop. And when it gets bad enough, they stop communicating entirely. They get to where they can't walk. She can still walk. This is what? A connection. This is the only connection between Neville and his mother. What kind of connection does Harry have with his parents? None. Okay? Why is this significant?
Because it shows what could have happened to Harry instead.
Okay. Why else? It connects Neville to whom? Voldemort. So that when we get the prophecy, and we're told what about the prophecy? Well, Harry, oddly enough, the prophecy could have been about Neville. Someone whose parents thrice defied Voldemort, Allison Frank Longbottom, did that. Someone who was born at the end of the 7th month, that's Neville too. What's the only thing that differentiates Neville from Harry?
He wasn't marked by the doctor. He wasn't marked by Voldemort.
Voldemort chose Harry. That's it. Okay. All right, we'll stop there. We'll pick up with occlumency and try to finish on Thursday.